Chapter 636. Final resolution. Samsara agreed on 20 million. However, Samsara's manager had a request. The 20 million wouldn't be paid all at once. 5 million would be paid in advance, while the other 15 million would be paid monthly over 24 months. The total number seemed to be fixed, but there could still be ways around it. Yishu had to try and fight for it. With the number already agreed upon, the two sides were much more relaxed. You give in a little bit, I give in a little bit, and so on. In the end, Yishu was able to get 8 million in advance and 12 million paid monthly over the next 12 months. After the negotiation finished, Yishu suddenly had an idea. He asked if he could use a portion of the money to be paid in materials from the game. Samsara's manager brightened up at this proposal, but when Yishu listed his requirements, the manager shook his head. No way. If it were normal materials, perhaps they could discuss it, but nearly all of the materials that Yishu had asked for were only dropped from wild bosses. If these materials could be bought, Samsara's manager would have easily spent that 20 million to buy what they could. The only reason that they would sell their materials would be if Samsara lost their ambition to win the championships, but with Samsara's current momentum and resolve, how is that a possibility? So when he heard Yishu's proposal, the manager immediately rejected it. When the manager proposed enormous amounts of materials that could be found in dungeons, Yishu also refused. He shook his head just like what Samsara's manager had done towards his proposal. One was a manager, one was a pro player. Neither of them were stupid. Both of them knew that the value of dungeon materials and wild boss materials were on a completely different scale. Dungeon materials could be easily bought if one had money, but wild boss materials were difficult to buy even if one had the money for it. This negotiation was different from before. Previously, Yishu had something that Samsara needed, so he had the advantage. With the overall deal finished, small arguments over minor details wouldn't stop the deal from being renegotiated, so most parties would slowly discuss the following matters. Samsara didn't have the time though. After buying the method, they needed to immediately use it and upgrade their characters. They didn't have much time left until the playoffs, so the manager didn't dare delay any longer over small details. From his observations, when Yishu had rejected the dungeon materials, Yishu had shook his head, but he hadn't been too resolute. So after talking about it for a while, the two sides began figuring out how to trade the materials for money. They obviously wouldn't be going according to market price. Yishu tried to lower the price, while Samsara's manager naturally wanted to raise the price. The manager talked about all sorts of troubles that Samsara was going through. He sounded as if they would be out on the streets if they went with Yishu's prices. Yishu obviously wouldn't trust him. He hard-heartedly fought back, occasionally reminding the manager that Samsara was busy and didn't have time. If not, he would threaten the manager by asking about the storages for Tyranny, Blue Rain, Tiny Herb, etc. and ask whether or not they might take the offer. Samsara's manager listened to him. Yishu was being so shameless. The two sides had already agreed on the deal, but they hadn't officially signed anything yet, so he was playing the backout card. Yishu was saying it to his face too. Shouldn't he feel embarrassed? However, Samsara's manager had a certain amount of confidence in this deal for materials. Don't look at how Yishu was constantly telling them that they needed to hurry. The manager also knew that Yishu was in a hurry too. Since he planned on building a team from scratch, he needed materials very badly. They wouldn't be able to enter the pro scene with a bunch of purple and orange equipment. Wild boss materials couldn't be bought, but researching self-made equipment also required lots of dungeon materials. Even though dungeon materials could be readily bought with money, Samsara's manager was certain that as long as they gave a price lower than the usual market price, Yishu would be tempted. The manager's analysis was correct. After going back and forth for a while, Yishu didn't continue to persist. He also knew that if he traded dungeon materials in this deal, he would be saving a lot of money in the future. As for whether or not these materials would have a lower value in the future, Yishu didn't care. His job wasn't to invest in the material market. After taking these materials, he would be using them and he needed to use them immediately. There was no time to wait for the prices to rise or fall. In the end, Yishu and Samsara's manager agreed upon a trade of 2 million RMB for dungeon materials. Yi Shu gave a call and had Wei Chen send them a copy of their needs, whether it was for his death hand or other self-made equipment requirements. The copy that Wei Chen sent over also had wild boss materials, but Samsara wouldn't budge on this point. Yi Shu could only erase them. Because it was just for dungeon materials, the amount of materials traded for 2 million RMB wouldn't be a small amount. After talking about it for a while, they finally reached a deal. The exact amount of money wasn't definite yet, but Yi Shu had gathered together his requirements. After giving the list of materials over to Samsara's manager, the manager handed it over to the specialists, who gave an estimate for the materials according to the manager's prices. After doing some rounding, they finalized the amount that they would receive for 2 million. When Yi Shu saw these huge quantities of materials being traded without Samsara even blinking an eye, Yi Shu was inwardly surprised at Samsara's resources. Their explosive growth this season wasn't without reason. The other details took another half-day to finalize. That night, the two sides drew up a contract and signed their names. Once Samsara arranged a transfer over the advance, Yi Shu finally relaxed. He downloaded the guide from his email and handed it to Samsara. Tisk tisk tisk, Samsara's manager personally inspected the goods to make sure that the quest list Yi Shu had given them was the same as in this document. When he saw that they had spent 20 million for this document, the manager sighed repeatedly. After inspecting the list, he had the specialists verify the content with the drop rate data that Yi Shu had provided beforehand. This wasn't an easy task, but it was necessary. The contract had a stipulation, meaning that if the guide didn't match the drop rate data provided, Samsara had the right to adjust the price accordingly. Because of this clause, Yi Shu couldn't help but feel nervous, waiting for the confirmation. If Concealed Light had made a silly mistake and somehow messed up a digit or two, it could be troublesome, but when he thought of Concealed Light's diligence, he managed to calm himself down a bit. This examination took place all night. Samsara's manager deserved to be in the gaming industry. He didn't have any problems staying up all night with Yi Shu to watch over it. Finally, at 4:37 a.m., the data verification was completed. There were no mistakes. Samsara's manager shook Yi Shu's hand. The largest deal in the history of Glory had officially concluded. It was only a pity that this deal wouldn't be announced to the public. From here on out, Samsara had full authority to do what they wanted with the guide. If Yi Shu wanted to use it, he would need Samsara's permission too. Of course, Yi Shu had guaranteed that it wouldn't restrict their team's strength. He had stressed this and Samsara also understood, so they didn't have any overly excessive demands. They just made sure that Yi Shu would not be able to sell this method to anyone else. It's been a long day. Let's get some rest. Come over tomorrow afternoon. We should host a feast for you. All of the issues had been resolved. Samsara's manager naturally loosened up. He didn't immediately kick Yi Shu and instead maintained his cordiality. There's no need for that. I've got to hurry and return as well. I will have to come back anyways sooner or later, Yi Shu said. Ha ha, that's true. I hope that time comes soon, Samsara's manager said. I'll see you then. You don't want to stay for dinner? No need, Yi Shu waved his hands and left Samsara. When he walked out of the elevator and turned around to look back, there were quite a few rooms still lit. Yi Shu reckoned that Samsara would be staying up all night to upgrade their characters. When Samsara's players woke up, they would have characters with skill points unrivaled in the Alliance. Seeing how Samsara was spending the night working, he guessed that knowledge of the guide wouldn't be passed down to the pro players. After all, pro players moved teams. Even if they signed a non-disclosure agreement, it was still another potential source of uncertainty. It would be better to simply keep the knowledge from spreading to as little people as possible. As for what Samsara was planning on doing with this in the future, Yi Shu didn't know either, but he was certain that Samsara was well aware of the issues with this guide. The reason that they bought it out was for their goal of becoming champions. Yi Shu didn't think that Samsara would use this guide as a money-making tool. Only studios would think of using it for profit. The clubs were at the top in terms of making money. Those below them were making far less too. A player or character transfer easily went into the millions, and with how fast the scene was growing, it wouldn't be long until it broke into the tens of millions. The characters in the Alliance relied on the existence of the game, but because of the Alliance, the value of these characters far surpassed those of normal game accounts. The Glory Alliance was a brand name even higher than the game itself. When Yishu returned to the hotel, he bought a plane ticket home. That night, Yishu returned to Happy Internet Cafe. He went to the practice room and saw everyone gathered there. Seeing Yishu return, everyone quieted down. How much money did we get? Wei Chen's voice was dry and rough. Yishu had been in touch with them these past 2 days. They obviously wanted to know the results, but Yishu wouldn't tell them. This was because the deal hadn't been completely closed yet, so Yishu didn't want to get their hopes up. In order to prevent them from having their worlds turn from heaven to hell, Yishu had kept it a secret. He would finally reveal the price to them now. Chapter 637. A large sum of money. TL, money is in RMB. 6.9 RMB, 1 United States dollar. The practice room was silent. No one ever thought that they could ever have too much money, even someone like Steamed Bun. Everyone looked nervously at Yishu in anticipation. Yishu slowly poured himself a cup of water to drink, took a sip, then grabbed a cigarette from his pocket and slowly lit it. If you don't spit out the answer, I'm going to kill you. Wei Chen had been anxious all day. When Yishu finally returned, he kept on stalling. How could Wei Chen not be furious? 2 million worth in materials, Yishu calmly answered. 2 million. Materials? Wei Chen's face twisted in disgust. To put it plainly, did Yishu even have the right to split the earnings? Of course not. This was considered Wei Chen's goods. Concealed Light would have a much greater split of the earnings than Yishu. All Yishu did was run errands. It would be nice of Wei Chen to even give him a share. Wei Chen obviously wasn't planning on keeping the money for himself. However, it seemed like Yishu only cared about himself and traded his years of effort for a bunch of materials. It was clearly for the team to use, but Wei Chen still didn't feel comfortable. Even though Yishu had contacted him asking about what materials he needed, he had expected something like this, but he didn't think Yishu would be so aggressive. 2 million. In materials. Even Chen Guo felt Yishu had been too excessive. When she heard Yishu's response, this guy seemed to take Wei Chen's things as his own and only thought about his own interests. If it was just a small amount, it didn't matter, but this was 2 million they were talking about. But things had already gotten to this point. Wei Chen was a grand person. 2 million? In the end, he laughed. Ha, that much materials should be more than enough for us to use. Enough my ass. They're all dungeon materials. They refuse to give us any wild boss materials, Yishu said. F***ck. Just because they won't give any, doesn't mean they won't sell any. What the F***ck were you doing? Wei Chen heard this, he had a hard time enduring it any longer. They spent 2 million, but didn't even get any of the materials he urgently needed. Yishu had done a real sh*t job this time. Sigh. What could he do though? Wei Chen could only sigh. He had given Yishu full authority to settle this deal and he was very unhappy with the results, but he felt bad saying anything. In the end, he could only sigh with regret. Chen Guo couldn't stand it any longer and was ready to ask a few questions. Was he planning on selling these materials for money? He wasn't going to use all of the materials, right? Even though Chen Guo didn't call Yishu out for being so despicable, she didn't feel happy either at only getting materials. Apart from materials, they're also paying us 6 million in advance, Yishu said indifferently. What? Wei Chen had been shaken up by the results, but after hearing this piece of news, he suddenly became excited again. Chen Guo, who had also been about to say something, froze. She heard it clearly and didn't need Yishu to repeat it. She suddenly felt gratified. Yishu hadn't just gotten materials. 6 million. You really are quite capable. Wei Chen grinned widely and gave Yishu a strong slap on the back. At this moment, Tang Ru noticed the words that Yishu had specifically used, 6 million as just the advance? Wei Chen stared blankly. 6 million was already enough to make his head spin. There was still more to it? Wei Chen stumbled backwards and held himself up using the table. He was afraid he would faint. Yeah, there's also another 12 million that will be paid monthly over the next year. That's it. Yishu finally took out the contract. Wei Chen grabbed it and flipped through it madly. He didn't care about all the clauses and whatnot. He just kept on flipping it, while mumbling, where? Where does it talk about the money? Wei Chen wanted to verify that this number was correct. Yi Shu had drawn up the contract line by line with Samsara, so he was obviously very familiar with it. He went over and found the line talking about the payment. Wei Chen's eyes sparkled when he saw the startling number. He yelled out, "Oh my god! F***ck me," and went back to collapse in his seat. Chen Guo, Tang Ru, and even Steamed Bun were shocked. 2 million in materials, 6 million down payment, and another 12 million paid over the coming year. The total value was 20 million. They knew that the guide would be bought for a considerable amount of money, but who would have thought that it would be such a large amount? Chen Guo kept up with the competitive scene and had previously been an excellent era fan. Sun Zhang's transfer for 7 million had been the highest ever seen in glory, but now, this guide was worth almost 3 times as much as a god. Chen Guo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. In any case, as long as it was better than excellent era, Chen Guo would be happy. A bigger number making her happy was a mark of her mentality as a fan. As a team manager, whether it was spending or earning money, it was all a business strategy. There was nothing to be so excited about. In 2 days, the down payment should arrive. Starting from next month, they'll be paying us 1 million every month. The money will be transferred directly to your bank account. Okay, have you got any more questions? Yi Shu said. Ha 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 ha. Wei Chen laughed wildly as he continually patted Yi Shu's shoulder. This guy's already gone crazy. Yi Shu hastily ran away. Chen Guo felt gratified too. Such an insane deal was definitely something to be satisfied with. As for how Wei Chen was planning on splitting the money, no one had the right to ask. If he wanted to invest in the team, that would be obviously be great. If he didn't want to, they didn't have any right to say anything. Chen Guo could only remind him that he shouldn't forget about concealed light. If concealed light hadn't helped, would they have been able to get this deal? Yi Shu also agreed. If they didn't have concealed light's precise drop rate data, even selling it would have been an issue in and of itself. After all, Wei Chen's previous data had been a complete mess. If they had given it to Samsara to look at, Samsara would ask what the drop rate was and he wouldn't even be able to give a definite answer. When Samsara had inspected the goods for their exact value, if it was Wei Chen's original data, it wouldn't even be possible to test it. If Samsara couldn't verify the value, it meant that there was an unknown risk and the price would certainly be much lower. Of course, Wei Chen showed his spirit of loyalty. Even though he acted shameless, he would never act in such a way for important business. 20 million. Concealed Light wasn't an internationally renowned mathematician, why would he refuse? Wei Chen messaged Concealed Light in the group chat. At this moment, Steamed Bun came over, sized up Wei Chen, and commented, "Who would have thought old Wei was so smart? To think you could casually earn so much money." Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, Wei Chen laughed madly. "In the future, I won't fight over who will pay the bill," Steamed Bun expressed. "Who's going to fight for it?" "I'll pay," Wei Chen replied magnanimously. At this moment, Concealed Light replied. He saw that it wasn't Yi Shu, but another team member. Concealed Light was surprised and carefully greeted Wei Chen. "Scientist. Thank you very much. That guide sold for 20 million. Tell me, how much do you want?" Wei Chen said. "Oh, that much. Amazing," Concealed Light replied. Because they were talking online, they couldn't tell if he was excited or not from his words. "Without you, we wouldn't have gotten so much," Wei Chen said. "No way. I didn't do anything. I just organized everything," Concealed Light said. The two talked for a while, but it seemed like Concealed Light didn't care about the 20 million and insisted that he didn't contribute anything to the guide, so he didn't have the right to any of the money. After talking back and forth, Concealed Light refused to budge. Wei Chen couldn't do anything about it. He wanted to give Concealed Light money, shouldn't that be an easy thing to do? It was a huge number like 20 million too. Even if it was just 1%, 200,000 was still a good amount of money. This scientist is so enlightened, Wei Chen couldn't persuade Concealed Light. Later, Concealed Light explained that he should tell his professor about it and see what his professor said. No one had any objections, of course. Soon afterwards, Concealed Light went offline. That night, Wei Chen didn't go back to the apartments to rest. He stayed up all night in the practice room. He was too excited to sleep. The next day, Concealed Light came back. He had asked Professor Zhang, who said he didn't need any money. He didn't seem to care that he had helped them earn such a huge sum of money. He just hoped that Wei Chen would use this money appropriately. Use it appropriately. Wei Chen studied Professor Zhang's words and asked everyone, is he telling me to use it to help run the team? F***ck. There was no saving him. Professor Zhang clearly wasn't talking about funding a professional gaming team when he said to use it appropriately. Innovation. The advancement of mankind. Everyone reminded him that this was what Professor Zhang meant. Wei Chen heard their responses and froze. He never imagined that he would ever do anything related to innovation or the advancement of mankind. How was he supposed to do that? Wei Chen felt vexed. It seemed like he was about to have another night of insomnia. Yi Shu sighed, don't think about it from a scholar's perspective. Just do what you think is appropriate. He just hopes that you don't waste your money on worthless things. Chapter 638. Guarding against the unexpected. Wei Chen glanced at Yi Shu. Wasn't Yi Shu basically telling him to use the money to finance the team? How shameless, but then again, he would just be making a fool of himself if he attempted to get into things like innovation or the advancement of humanity. Helping the team had been his original intention all along. This time, he would be financing his dream, so Wei Chen would happily to do so. Ahem, we need to hurry and improve the strength of our characters right now. Wei Chen cleared his throat and spoke. With the money in his pockets, his tone of voice became much brighter. He acted like he was some great sage, completely different from his usual hoodlum self. Oh, how do you say we improve them? Yi Shu asked. Equipment. What else? Wei Chen said. Doesn't that require materials? 2 million worth of materials isn't enough for you, Yi Shu asked. Such a large amount of dungeon materials was more than enough for their team to use. They hadn't received these materials yet though because they were still individual players in the heavenly domain. They didn't even have the ability to receive these materials. The materials in Samsara were stored in their guild storage, not carried by individual characters. All of these dungeon materials were more than enough to use for improving their current equipment. You didn't get any wild boss materials. What's the point? Wei Chen hadn't slept last night. He had carefully looked over the contract. There wasn't anything rare in those 2 million worth of materials. For self-made equipment, the higher the level, the more stringent the requirement for the materials would be. Even if one could find dungeon materials to replace the rarer materials, the creator wouldn't be happy to do so. Different materials might be able to form a self-made equipment, but how much would it affect its stats? The shape of the equipment was crucial, but the stats were the most important. It's similar to building a PC. The PC will have a CPU, RAM, hard disk, video graphics card, but there were differences in quality. A PC made with higher-end components would certainly perform better than one with lower-end components. Self-made equipment strived for the best stats. If one used low-grade materials to create a piece of equipment with the stats of an orange equipment, what was the point? Using these materials to replace higher-end material was just a way to save on costs, but some things just couldn't be replaced. And this was just based on the upgrade process alone. When the equipment needed to be upgraded to level 70, if the conditions permitted it, it was best to completely use uncommon materials to create the equipment. Only then would the stats be at the peak. If one didn't use uncommon materials, the equipment created wouldn't be considered truly self-made equipment. Can you get uncommon materials even if you have money? Yi Shu asked in return. Wei Chen couldn't answer him. There were very few uncommon materials amongst the normal player base. Even studios couldn't compete with the clubs. Uncommon materials were completely monopolized by clubs, and as a core component of self-made equipment, as long as the club wasn't about to go bankrupt, no club would ever sell them. Even if they weren't going to use the material, they could still use it to trade for other uncommon materials. When a team dissolved, their storage would be thoroughly cleaned out. However, these sort of dissolved guilds wouldn't have many materials to begin with anyways. In addition, the other clubs would have swarmed over to buy the materials first. Yi Shu and the others would never even get the chance to buy them. They had money, but this money couldn't be used to buy uncommon materials. Of course, if you put up a high enough price like 10 million for material, no club would refuse, but who would be so wasteful? Their need for dungeon materials had been met, but the crucial uncommon material still had to be obtained through the game. Little Tang, steamed bun, try and enter the heavenly domain as soon as you can. Once you do that, finish the rest of those quests, Yi Shu said. What? Are you afraid Samsara is going to pull some sort of trick? Wei Chen noticed. Just in case, Yi Shu said. Didn't you say that, with a foundation like Samsara's, the game company won't be able to figure out the reason? Chen Guo said. But what if they intentionally revealed it to the game company to establish their advantage? Yi Shu said. Everyone was startled. For Samsara, the most important thing is to maintain their advantage over all the other teams. They aren't going to use the guide to make money, so once they use it, they'll throw it away. That would be the safest way to ensure they maintain their advantage. From then on, no one else will have this guide to improve their skill points, and they would keep their advantage in skill points until who knows how long, Yi Shu said. Even though they have restrictions set in the contract, this sort of thing isn't too easy to control, so just in case, we should hurry and get as many of those skill points as we can, Yi Shu said. Why didn't you say so earlier? Chen Guo panicked and hastily urged Tang Ru and Steamed Bun to step it up. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun weren't max leveled yet, but with their skill, they shouldn't have any difficulty finishing the Heavenly Domain challenge. After all, their skill far surpassed normal players. Even if they somehow weren't able to complete it, wasn't Yi Shu there? He could finish it at level 50 and he wouldn't have any problems finishing it for them if they were incapable. When the two heard Yi Shu's words, they also began to hurry. Tang Ru had taken the quest chain at level 50, but she had trouble completing it at that time, so she decided to put it on hold. Afterwards, as she leveled up, she went back to the quest chain and had finished the majority of it already. Steamed Bun hadn't received the quest originally, but when she saw that Tang Ru was already doing it before she was level 70, he also learned from her and occasionally completed parts of the quest chain. However, Steamed Bun's progress wasn't as smooth as Tang Ru's. In a few places that required precision, it wasn't that Steamed Bun couldn't do it, but rather, he always wanted to try to succeed in some sort of weird way, which always resulted in failure. As a result, Yi Shu supervised and urged Steamed Bun to hurry and finish the quest chain. Tang Ru focused and finished the quest chain that day. Following after Yi Shu's Lord Grimm and Chao Yifan's 1-inch Ash, there were now 3 characters from the 10th server in the Heavenly Domain. Afterwards, she went to do the skill point quests that she hadn't done yet in the Heavenly Domain. After receiving a quest, she completed it and received a skill book, which meant that Samsara hadn't pulled a dirty trick just yet. It had only been a day or two. No matter how fast Samsara was, they couldn't be that fast. The game company might not decide to change the quests, even after knowing about this skill point farming method. Let alone Samsara, even the Alliance could only communicate with the game company. They didn't have any way of forcing them to do anything if they didn't want to do it. More often than not, the Alliance had to adapt to whatever changes the game made. That night, another 5,000 skill point character was birthed from Happy Internet Cafe. According to Concealed Light's data, of the 1650 skill points possible, a character would get around 965 skill points on average. From this number, Yi Shu's and Tang Ru's luck were already extremely good. They hadn't even finished all of the quests yet and they already received 1,000 skill points. Wei Chen didn't stay idle. His Windward formation had finished all of those quests, but didn't he still have a Warlock account on hand? However, this account had been obtained along with Unrivaled Super Hottie when Yi Shu won the wager. The skill points were very average, 4,210 points. Wei Chen had run quests all night. Quests already completed couldn't be done again. In the end, he ended up with a total of 4,480 skill points. This was pretty good for normal players, but for them, Wei Chen's efforts were for nothing. What do I do? Do I buy 100 Warlock accounts? Wei Chen was starting to panic. Windward formation had 4,920 skill points, but it wasn't good enough. Now that he was rich, he started with an estimate of 100 accounts. 100? 1,000 wouldn't even be enough. These are normal accounts. Do you think all of them have the same base stats as a pro characters? Yi Shu said. It looks like I'll have to specially order a few, but what if the accounts come out and the quests are wasted? Wei Chen was worried. 4,920 skill points isn't bad. Even Samsara won't have all of their characters maxed with 5,000 skill points, Yi Shu said. No, I refuse. Let me think. Wei Chen hadn't slept the previous night and had been focusing hard the entire day, but he was still full of energy. Tang Ru was done and it was just a matter of time before Steamed Bun finished as well, but there was also Concealed Light and Little Cold Hands. Concealed Light's issue lay in his mechanics. He wouldn't be able to reach the heavenly domain in a short amount of time either. There were also a few places in the guide, which required a certain level of mechanics too. It would be a waste if Concealed Light didn't get the same treatment. With no other choice, Yishu took Concealed Light's account card and completed it for him. As for Little Cold Hands, they had only been in touch with him for a short amount of time. The trust between them was still extremely limited, so he didn't feel confident in showing the guide over to Little Cold Hands. Even more so, Little Cold Hands was an old account. If he had finished all of the quests before, he wouldn't be able to receive any skill points. Would his account be like Wei Chen's or Chen Guo's accounts and only be able to get around max out at 4,500 skill points? That was far from being good enough to compete with the pros. Just thinking about it wouldn't get anything done. Yishu contacted Little Cold Hands on QQ. Little Cold Hands had 4,170 skill points. As expected, it was only a normal account. As for which quests he had done before, Little Cold Hands was an account that had been gifted to him, so he didn't know either. With no other choice, Yishu gave the handed over a list of quests to him too and have him check which quests he had done before. If he hadn't, then he shouldn't touch them for now. It's very important. Please hurry and check, Yishu said. What's so special about these quests? Little Cold Hands wasn't like Steamed Bun, who wouldn't think to ask before doing something. It has to do with improving your character's strength, but it requires a special method, so I need to make sure your character hasn't done all of these quests already, Yishu explained. Chapter 639. Playoffs. By improving strength, are you referring to skill books? As expected, Little Cold Hands wasn't Steamed Bun. It wasn't hard to arrive at this answer. He was a max-leveled character. If he wanted to strengthen his character, there were only two ways: skill points and equipment. Yishu had just asked him about his character's skill points and now, he wanted him to do some seemingly random quests. It was only to be expected that he would put two and two together. Yes. First, verify which quests you've already completed. Yishu didn't hide it. Even though they weren't too familiar with one another, Little Cold Hands would still be a member of their future team. It wouldn't be good to treat him like a complete outsider. Sure, give me a moment to check, Little Cold Hands replied. As a result, the team began to hurry and improve their skill points as if they were participating in the upcoming playoffs as well. After Little Cold Hands circled around the heavenly domain and the normal server, he reported the results to Yishu. His luck was quite good. Little Cold Hands hadn't done many of the quests yet. Of the total 1650 skill points possible, he still had 1220 skill points that he could potentially obtain. His character only needed 830 skill points to max out, so if his luck was good, he just might be able to do it. This type of normal account made Chen Guo very envious. Her Chasing Haze had completed most of these quests already, so she hadn't gained much from the guide. However, Chen Guo had created a new account in the new server earlier and made sure to leave all of these quests open, but with the quest guide being bought out by Samsara, by the time her new Chasing Haze reached the heavenly domain, it was hard to say if she would still be able to utilize the guide. Chen Guo was upset. She only regretted that she hadn't spent enough time on the new server account to level this account faster. That's pretty good. You have a lot of quests still available. If it's okay with you, could you leave this account with me? I'll help you finish these quests, Yishu said. I can't do them myself? It requires a special method, Yishu said. Little Cold Hands didn't ask any further questions. Yishu had expected this to happen because the other side was an astute person, who had certainly realized that this method couldn't easily be given away. Little Cold Hands wasn't just astute either. He was also smart. Yishu trusted that Little Cold Hands wouldn't blame him for not giving him the guide to see. The question was whether or not Little Cold Hands was willing to entrust him with his own account. It had to be known that this guy had initially suspected Yishu of trying to swindle him. Yishu hadn't asked him for anything like a cash deposit, but the first thing he asked him to do was send over his account card. It seemed very much like a scam. Are you in a hurry? Sure enough, Little Cold Hands was a bit hesitant. The faster the better, Yishu replied. Little Cold Hands left this message and then became silent. The conversation had been conducted in the group chat, so everyone else saw it too. Apart from Steamed Bun, everyone could tell Little Cold Hand's misgivings. Thus, Wei Chen suddenly spoke impatiently, "Stop wasting time. How much could your account possibly be worth? I'll give you a down payment." Wei Chen's wealth was considerable right now, and he had no qualms using it. "Oh, if that's the case, how about 2,000? Little Cold Hands actually gave a number. His account was very average, but it was still a member of tyrannical ambition. Amidst the normal player base, it wouldn't be considered too bad. F***CK, you actually dared." Wei Chen was surprised. "What?" Little Cold Hands asked in doubt. Wei Chen was speechless. When he said he would give a down payment, according to Wei Chen's understanding, the other side would usually be too embarrassed to ask for the money and would just happily send over the account card. It turns out he had met someone on a completely different wavelength than himself. The other side immediately answered back and actually gave a price. But since things had already reached such a stage, Wei Chen felt awkward, but he couldn't back out, could he? Plus, after having received 20 million, 2,000 was nothing to him. "Alright, send me your bank account info." Wei Chen didn't say anything more. Little Cold Hands didn't hesitate and sent over his bank account info. "Check your account tomorrow," Wei Chen coldly said and turned his head towards Yi Shu. "I don't like this guy." Not many people would like what Little Cold Hands had just done. Even Chen Guo wasn't happy. Although they didn't trust Little Cold Hands and didn't send him a copy of the guide, the difference between their exchanges were completely different. Chen Guo was certain that if it were anyone else in Little Cold Hands' position, they wouldn't have done the same thing that Little Cold Hands had done. Thinking about it in this way, Chen Guo felt more comfortable looking at Little Cold Hands with disdain and began expressing her discontent with Wei Chen. In any case, they were now busy attending to improving these characters. As the days passed, the start of the playoffs finally arrived. Blue Rain, Samsara, Tiny Herb, Tyranny, Misty Rain, Void, Thunderclap, 301. These were their final placings in the regular season. The seedings for the playoffs were decided by these placings: 1st versus 8th, 2nd versus 7th, 3rd versus 6th, 4th versus 5th. This was also the order of the matches. Blue Rain versus 301. Samsara versus Thunderclap. Tiny Herb versus Void. Tyranny versus Misty Rain. 4 matches would be conducted across the span of 4 days. To make it easier to stream the matches would take place separate from one another. The matches would cycle between the home arenas of the two teams to give equal opportunities for each team to share the profit for the revenue generated by playoff tickets. Thus, the first round of the playoffs would take 8 days total. In the second round, the 4 teams that won would move on and finish another 4 matches in 4 days. The finals would be 2 matches over 4 days as well. Because the matches would take place at different arenas, the players had to move around, so they didn't want them to become too tired. The competition format was the same as before: an individual competition, group competition, and a team competition. The total points in the home and away matches would be added up. Because there had to be a winner, when totaling up the points, there would be a few subtle differences than they had in calculations during the regular season. The start of the playoffs received a large amount of attention from Glory players, so it usually started on a Saturday, but because many watched the matches, many of them would hold off on playing the game during that time, which affected the number of people playing the game. For the match on the first day, Blue Rain vs 301, everything went as expected. Blue Rain had a huge lead. With such a huge gap in skill and placing, it was unrealistic for 301 to catch up to Blue Rain in their own home arena. Blue Rain's performance immediately drew comments such as "killed the competition." Such a quick victory made it seem like the playoffs would not be suspenseful, making people looking for a profit not as happy, but for the team, having such a large lead early on was a good thing. For the match on the second day, Samsara vs Thunderclap, a lot of people were looking for an upset. Samsara had gained more and more momentum as the season went on. When the playoffs arrived, Samsara was believed to have the greatest chances of winning. Naturally, a lot of people didn't want this to happen and were waiting to see them fail. Despite not having an incredible ace player, but one of the master tacticians, Xiao Shikan, leading them instead, Team Thunderclap was often a team that gave powerhouses a lot of trouble. But the results made them disappointed. Samsara maintained their usual dominance after the All-Star weekend and crushed Team Thunderclap in their home arena. This result made many surprised. Even if Thunderclap lost, with Xiao Shikin's tactics, they shouldn't have lost so badly. Everyone in Happy Internet Cafe paid more attention to this match than the first match. They naturally wanted to see how much of a difference the skill points would make, and the results didn't disappoint them. What a pity. If they didn't have those skill points, Thunderclap wouldn't have lost so badly. Yi Shu hit the nail on the head. Team Thunderclap often lacked the strength to dominate opponents, so they usually won through meticulously studying their opponents and finding a strategy to win. As a result, no one ever underestimated Thunderclap. However, this time, Samsara had sudden improvement in skill points. This type of change significantly impacted Thunderclap's plans. As expected, Thunderclap appeared to be underprepared and their tactics didn't seem to be on point. In reality, it was impossible for their tactics to be on point because the data and information used by Xiao Shikin to form the strategy were all wrong. No one but insiders would realize this point. After this match, the only person who would realize this point would be Xiao Shikin himself. In the press conference afterwards, he talked about how the other side had some unexpected improvements. As for what these improvements were, Xiao Shikin probably had a few rough estimates, but he didn't say anything. For the next match, Xiao Shikin said a few words that could be regarded as half-hearted. For the match on the third day, the match between Tiny Herb and Void was actually very intense. The synergy between the Ghostblade duo of Team Void was immaculate. When Yi Chu retired this season, the two had received the Best Partner reward in the regular season. In the end, Team Void and the previous champions Team Tiny Herb fought an even match, but despite Team Void having the home field advantage, Team Void was still on the losing side. However, the most intense match would be between Tyranny and Misty Rain. The two teams fought for the longest. In the end, Misty Rain relied on their home field advantage to gather more points. Their second match would only be more intense. After Yi Shu watched this match, he was quite baffled. Han Wenking isn't performing too well. His longtime rival unexpectedly made him feel like he was a stranger. Chapter 640. You can see that too. Really? Wei Chen heard Yi Shu's remark and asked. Han Wenking had been playing since the beginning of the professional scene, so Wei Chen obviously knew him. They had fought against each other many a time before, but it had been many years since then, and no matter how deep of an impression he had of him, there was no way it could compare to the deep rivalry that existed between Yi Shu and Han Wenking. Yi Shu had noticed a problem, but he hadn't noticed anything wrong at all. In his eyes, the two sides had fought intensely. It was a very high skill match and he hadn't seen any issues with Tyranny's ace player, Han Wenking. I guess he's not playing badly, but something doesn't feel right, Yi Shu said. What doesn't feel right? Wei Chen immediately asked. He wasn't nervous for no reason. As a retired pro player, his reaction speed and hand speed was declining, but he was certainly still at a pro level in terms of experience, knowledge, and perceptiveness. I can't say exactly right now, Yi Shu furrowed his brow and shook his head. Happy Internet Cafe would, without question, stream the playoffs, but they were currently watching it in the practice room. Because of their differences in skill levels, their discussions were at a different level. Yi Shu and Wei Chen gave their opinions on the matches. Chen Guo knew a bit more about the game, so she could understand some of what they were saying. As for Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, they had only played for several months already, but weren't complete noobs anymore. However, if they had to discuss the very fine details of the match, the two probably wouldn't be able to keep up. The two were at a complete loss when Yi Shu said that something was wrong with Han Wenking. Both of them looked at Yi Shu, waiting for him to continue. Yi Shu didn't say anything further though. The stream was already showing the post-match interview. Tyranny and Misty Rain hadn't made any major mistakes. Both teams had gone all out that match and neither team would feel too regretful if they lost. The interviewed players practically said the same thing. They expressed their confidence in their respective teams, praised their opponents, and spoke of their faith in being able to win the next match, etc. Tyranny's captain Han Wenking naturally participated in the interview. Because Yi Shu had specially called him out, everyone else paid close attention to what he said and also stared at his facial expressions. However, everything seemed to be normal. It didn't look like there was anything abnormal with Han Wenking's condition. When the interview ended and the stream went offline, everyone turned to look at Yi Shu, waiting for him to say something. Yishu only shook his head and returned to his computer. Everyone else returned to their seats too. Wei Chen went back to his seat and saw that Yishu still seemed to be thinking hard. He didn't bother him and handed him a cigarette instead. Yishu received it and quietly lit it. He still didn't say anything. He opened up a web browser and typed in a few words. Wei Chen watched from over his shoulder and saw that it was a site for downloading VODs. It seemed like Yishu was planning on studying the match. However, since the match just ended, it would take some time before it would be uploaded. Seeing that it couldn't be downloaded yet, Yishu opened up a folder and began looking through Tyranny's previous matches. He watched match after match, closely spectating Han Wenking's Desert Smoke. Yishu gradually began to relax. Soon afterwards, he went back to the site and downloaded the most recent match. Wei Chen had been paying attention to Yishu's actions the entire time, so when he saw the change in expression, he asked, "Did you figure it out?" "Pretty much," Yishu replied. Chen Guo went over and asked, "What's the situation?" "He's changing," Yishu said. "Changing?" "Yeah, he's changing his habits and striker movements. He's researching a new style of playing his class," Yishu said. "He really refuses to give up," Wei Chen sighed. Creating a new style wasn't an easy task. Even though every few levels brought new skills or new equipment, there was always a certain amount of variance, but the change from these new skills or equipment could only be considered adjustments. They wouldn't cause a player to significantly change his or her playstyle. The classes in Glory were very balanced, so updates didn't bring much change to a class core. If Yishu said someone of Han Wenking's caliber was researching a new playstyle, it wasn't going to be just a simple numbers adjustment. A slight adjustment like that wasn't anything difficult for a pro player to adapt to. It wouldn't be something that Yishu would be so surprised about either. Han Wenking was clearly trying to do something completely different. Soon afterwards, Yishu finished downloading the VOD. Yishu immediately replayed it. Wei Chen also watched. Even though Tang Ru and Steam Bun were interested, it wasn't something they would be able to comprehend. To put it plainly, pro players specialized in PvP. The biggest difference between PvP and PvE was how deep one's understanding of all the classes were, whether it was your class or any other class. What skills, combos, playstyles, strategy, etc. were all something that pro players needed to know very thoroughly. Tang Ru and Steam Bun were quite familiar with their respective classes, but their understanding of other classes was still limited. Let alone someone trying to create a new playstyle, let alone them, even Chen Guo wouldn't be able to say much. Sure enough, Chen Guo was also at a complete loss when Yishu paused and commented on a segment, but this time, she felt gratified that even Wei Chen was at a loss too. See, here. Quote, after watching several of Desert Smoke's matches, Yishu had grasped the general line of thinking and pointed out the changes in his playstyle. If this had happened in the past, he would have most likely stepped forward and began pushing forward using reinforced iron bones or jumped backwards and sent a whirlwind kick back. Instead, he stepped sideways and used a collapsing fist. It seems like he plans on initiating with an empty-handed block. I've never seen him do something like that before. Quote. Really? Wei Chen was really at a loss because Yishu's comment had been too detailed and random. Every player would react differently depending on each situation. How could Yishu guess all of that? Over here too, not waiting for Wei Chen to understand, Yishu pointed at another place. Here. Don't you think this dual tiger fists is too sudden? Really? I feel like it's a good choice. Wei Chen continued to be at a loss. The screen was currently playing the most recent match between Misty Rain and Tyranny. Two melee characters closed in under the protection of the bombardment by Chu Yongshu's Windy Rain. However, Desert Smoke closed in on them faster and sent the two flying away with a dual tiger fists. Cloud Body Dual Tiger Fists. Isn't that a common combo? Wei Chen said. Cloud Body was a movement skill for strikers. Cloud Body followed by Dual Tiger Fists was called Cloud Body Dual Tiger Fists. It was one of the most commonly used striker combos. Cloud Body was used a bit later, but Dual Tiger Fists was used a bit earlier, Yishu said. Wei Chen rewatched the segment twice and then gave up. Okay, who else here actually sees that? Wei Chen looked towards Chen Guo, who shook her head too. Cloud Body Dual Tiger Fists was a common combo that she also knew about, but everyone used it slightly differently. Han Wenqing's usage of the combo seemed to have a good effect, but she couldn't see anything weird about it. If it was before, he would have never played like this, Yi Shu said. How did he do it before? Wei Chen asked. Is it better or worse now? Chen Guo asked. Yi Shu only shook his head. I can't say. It seems like he's still figuring it out too. Yi Shu continued to watch and found several other segments to talk about, but Wei Chen and Chen Guo were completely at a loss. They listened and got a general understanding of the changes. Han Wenqing's changes were in the small details. Some of the places were just his intentions, but Yi Shu could actually see through these intentions and analyze them. He's a bit late here. That's not something he would have done in the past. He's probably thinking of. In the end, Chen Guo couldn't help but feel moved after hearing Yi Shu come to these conclusions. The person who understands you the best is your enemy. This saying really isn't wrong. Not wrong at all. Wei Chen nodded his head. He wasn't nervous anymore. Not being able to see what Yi Shu was seeing wasn't an issue with his skill level, but rather his understanding of Han Wenqing himself. Yi Shu was also nicknamed Glory's Encyclopedia, and he probably had a better understanding of the various classes, apart from warlocks, than Wei Chen. And from the sounds of it, Han Wenqing's new playstyle wasn't something at a fundamental level. If not, a new skill combo would have easily been noticed by any experienced player, let alone a pro, but for these minute changes, there were very few people besides Yi Shu who would notice them. At the post-match interview, Misty Rain's players never mentioned this change. It meant that Han Wenqing was still in the midst of changing it. Once he figured this out, Wei Chen didn't want to watch any further. He patted Yi Shu and said, "You should have Little Tang and Steamed Bun listen to your chatter. It'll definitely increase their understanding of strikers." Those two need to improve in this area. Yi Shu heard his advice and nodded his head.